Welcome, impactful parents. Today we're going to be talking about teaching kids about setting boundaries so they don't give in to peer pressure. Hello, my name is Christina Campos. I'm founder of The Impactful Parent, and I help parents of school age children who want to be one step ahead of their kids to turn their chaos into connection with their adolescent. I'm a mom of four, a teacher that's taught every grade from preschool through high school, and today I help moms and dads like yourself to navigate that exhausting, confusing, frustrating, but rewarding world of parenting. So, welcome to The Impactful Parent. And today I have my co host with me, Rodrigo Bravo. Rodrigo is a co parenting mediator out of the state of Texas. He's a parenting coach and he is a dad of two boys. Rodrigo brings a perspective from a dad's point of view onto the impactful parent stage to give you even more expertise and an added perspective to our parenting topics. Thank you for being here, Rodrigo. Let's get started. All right, starting today with our video of discussion about boundaries. Let's roll the tape.
We would put peas on Charlie's tray to eat for supper, and he would pick them up and he'd throw them on the floor. And we'd say, Charlie, you have two choices. You can leave your peas on your tray, or you can be done eating. What do you choose? He'd look me right in the eye, take those peas, drop them right on the floor, and say, okay, Charlie, you chose to be done with supper. I'm hungry. Yeah, I know, it's too bad. I really wanted you to eat more, but you chose to be done. That's it. He's done.
How many times do you need to do that before they recognize?
It's a harder question that you need to ask. How many times do you backslide before they don't believe you?
Fuck! Every time!
Right.
I'm always backsliding.
You have to backslide once before they know you're full of shit. And here's the thing about boundaries. Children learn boundaries from observing how you hold them. So the way I would do it is when Ellen would push and say, no, I really want it. Fast forward to her in the back of a car. She's 16. She's on a date. He's saying, I really want it. I brought the chocolate. I modeled and taught her to give in when it gets too hard to say no.
All right, I like how this video has such a common and simple example of how a seemingly unimportant interaction with a toddler is actually really important in parenting. And dinner battles are common in many households. And I would encourage the audience already to consider what common battles do you have with your child on the daily or on the weekly? And then from there, what are we teaching them with those battles? That is what I had to think about myself after I saw that video. And I'll also say that no parent is perfect. Okay. Definitely. For me, I battle clean rooms with my kids. And so I was thinking back, like, okay, what's a battle that I'm teaching my kids? And the battle that's consistent is cleaning their room. Have a clean room. Problem with this example is that this is also not the hill I want to die on as a parent. But maybe that makes it even a better example, because on the things that I am ready to hold my ground on, my kids know that I'm not going to budge. But there's not very many of those. So really, these seemingly unimportant interactions, even me trying to get my child to clean their room, is probably more impactful to them because it's happening a lot more often. Every week, I'm battling that. And because it's not a hill I want to die on in parenting, I nag and I also let it go. And now this video had me reconsidering, what the heck am I doing? Because what am I teaching my kids? It's okay if I'm teaching them, maybe a clean room isn't the top priority in your life. Like, I'm okay with that meaning. But if it goes beyond that to, for example, like what she does, and she extrapolated, 16 years later, blah, blah, then I need to change things around in my household. And either way, I was like, I loved how this video made me stop and pause and go, ooh, is there something I need to tweak in my parenting? So I wanted to get your take. What were your reactions when you first saw the video, and do you do this?
Well, Christina, so much to unpack here. First of all, clean rooms are also important to me, so I'm with you on that. But there is a lot to unpack because, as you know, one of my favorite things to say is you should model the behavior that you want your child to have. And kids, they don't learn by listening; they learn by looking, by seeing, and by modeling. And so that's why there's such a dissonance sometimes among parenting when we say, hey, do this and you should do this and that. But then they see us do something that's counter to that. Don't lie, okay? Don't lie. Da, 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 da. And then they hear us with a white lie or like a deeper lie to avoid something or whatever the case may be. So we inadvertently, either consciously or subconsciously, we model the behavior that our kids unfortunately are going to pick up in those instances. However, if you model good behavior, then obviously you hope that they're going to pick up those good behaviors. This particular video, when we saw it, I too felt like, wow, that is really important. I do stress that myself. And you mentioned battles right now. I definitely pick and choose my battles, but I also pick and choose how to confront those battles. You were talking about clean room. I immediately, what I always do is I give my boys a stake in it, and I tell them, hey, what time do you think you could have the room cleaned by? So now they have an investment in that choice. It's not just me coming over, clean your room, and da 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 da. No, they don't see it as a mandate. Now I've given them a choice. Now they're the ones that are telling me, hey, what's okay? Well, yeah, what time should I clean my room?
Mm-hmm.
And they're thinking about it, and they make the choice at what time, and they're the ones that put that. And then I hold them accountable to the choices that they make, as opposed to me telling them like 10 a.m. Maybe 10 a.m. was too early for them. I don't know. I just want the room cleaned. Does it need to be clean right there and right there? No. Now if somebody's coming over, then yes, I'll make that mandate. And I think they understand that. They're like, hey, dad didn't give me a choice this time, so it's super important. As opposed to if I constantly said that, they'll decrease the level of the urgency behind that. So that's one way that we can, help them with that. But I do believe that what the video is presenting is really important, because when we back down as parents, we inadvertently show that we're not we're not serious about what we're talking about. So you have to be very mindful about what you're talking about and what you're trying to have your child understand. Does that make sense, Christina? Like,
Oh, it
making sure that,
absolutely does. Yeah, yeah, and that's the point. It's so we don't always have that top of mind, and it's so important to know that these little things matter because they're sending messages. Everything we do send is a message.
yes, 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 yes. What my mentor of mine once told me, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah,
And
that's
and
great.
and 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 I love that, because that puts you on your toes at all times. And you just mentioned right now, your kids are always watching you. They're always observing you, and whatever you do and you rationalize and make it seem like it's okay, they're going to do the same thing. So it's important that we
Now,
don't, you know.
she states, how many times can a parent backslide, give in, change your mind, whatever, before a child realizes that you're full of shit? And she says, once. Do you agree with that?
I agree, depending on the urgency of that backslide. If there's new information that arrives to your decision that you have to consider, I think it's okay. If nothing has changed, then absolutely, by all means, if you've decided to make this the hill that you plant your flag, you gotta hold the ground. You gotta Game of Thrones reference. Hold the door, okay? Because your kids will see that. Your kids will see, and I'm gonna be honest with you, like that particular moment about eating. I'm a little bit more laissez-faire about eating. I understand there's preferences. I have preferences too. And so I'm not gonna force myself to eat something just because it's on my plate. If there's peas I hate peas, by the way. I they are disgusting to me. I don't know.
I'm
This
with
may be
you on this. I don't have
this
to.
this might be the hottest take we have today, okay? But I cannot stand peas, and people are trying to make peas a thing. They're trying to put them in different things, and oh my god, I don't even know where peas come from. I hate them. But again, another example. If I don't like food and I purposely don't put food on my plate that I don't like, why would I force my kids to eat something that they don't like? Now I get it. Maybe they don't like vegetables, right? So they're hating everything. The first thing I would do is find out, okay, what's your favorite vegetable? Let's try some vegetables, and you tell me which was your favorite. I don't like vegetables. Okay, there's got to be one that you like. You like mushrooms on pizza, right? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, let's start from there. Start finding out what those vegetables are that they like, and use those vegetables. We start forcing kids to eat stuff. They can actually end up traumatized. I I'm Mexican and I do not like calabacita. That's
What?
squash yeah, I don't see. They're like, whoa, whoa, oh man, the takes are hot today. No, but I was traumatized because an aunt of mine forced me to eat a plate of calabacita, and it took 5 hours. 5 hours. I was in Mexico. It's a long story, but bottom line was she forced me to eat that, and that just created this trauma that I cannot eat calabacita. Now I've made a little bit of inroads, like with pozole, and if there's a piece there, but I definitely avoid it. If it's on the menu or somebody's serving it, I don't get it. I don't taste it, nothing like that, because I have such a strong reaction from that. And so, anyways, going back to our kids, I would feel that on food items, choices of entertainment, all kinds of different things, there should be some leeway where your kid actually has a choice in that. I don't feel like those are urgent matters. Now, if we're talking about something urgent, then yes, I definitely feel you got to stand the line. You got to say, like, look, this is not acceptable. I don't. What's one line for you, Christina, that you say like, hey, you cannot cross this line. It is unacceptable. That you will hold the line and you'll plant the flag there. What is one thing? And I'm talking about like serious stuff or non-serious stuff. But what's one thing for you?
Yeah, when my kids were smaller, it was crossing the street alone. Like, I just,
Mm,
put my gauntlet down. It was like, "You
yes.
cannot cross the street alone when you're there."
And
Now
parking lots, right? In parking
right,
lots.
yeah, like parking lots,
Yes,
we hold
yes,
hands,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
there are certain rules, and most of those, like, I wanna die on this hill type of things were all around safety. And I would say even as old my kids are now older, it's still the same thing. Like, I wanna know if you have a social media account, and that's going to be a hill that I'm going to, like, no secret stuff in the back and, things like that. But it's around safety. That's my bottom line usually.
No, and I think that's great. I when I coach my parents when we're talking about the differences in households, I always create kind of an alliance based on rules, common rules, and I ask one parent, "Hey, what are the rules of your house?" Like, I'm not saying like they got to be finite, but let's do that, and then let's do this, and then combine the rules and see where there's ground. And a lot of it is social media. And the parents are saying like, no, if you're gonna be on social media, I need to know, the count, and then sometimes the password or something like that, whatever, right? But the whole point is it's built around safety. And I think our job as parents, especially at the very beginning, is to provide that safety, right? Provide that comfort and that security for our kids because they can't make good decisions at that point, you know. And so I think those are great hills. Those are great areas where you don't backslide, where you don't slip. For example, I tell my boys like, be honest with me.
Mhm.
I'm honest with you. I'm always going to be there for you. And every time that there's been a slip up or something, recently, for example, my son decided just to go from San Antonio to Houston on a trip. I let him. I'm confident that he can do that. He's done it plenty of times, but he did it without telling me. And he told me, and he says, "Hey, Dad, I'm in Houston, and I came to visit my mom, and other stuff." And I let him have his moment. I just said, "Okay." I didn't want to rain on his parade at that point. He was here. He was, this and that. And then I said, "Okay, just call me later." And then he called me again, but he was busy with. I said, "Look, give me 10 minutes in the morning. Call me tomorrow. We'll talk." And he's like, "Is everything okay?" I go, "Yeah, I just need to talk to you. That's all." And in the morning, I told him, I straight up told him, I said, "Dude, I'm super disappointed in you right now. Like, I really, the one thing I need you to do is be honest with me about what you're doing, because if something happens to you, I'm gonna take care of you. But I can't take care of you if I don't know where you're at. I'm not over here checking the phone, seeing where you're at, and like constantly. I don't micromanage at all, man. You know that because you've been out and about. I don't say nothing. But if you're taking a trip, you got to tell me so that I understand. Like, okay, my son's on a trip. I'm gonna, like make sure he's okay, check up on him. If he takes too long in one particular spot, maybe he has a flat, maybe whatever the case may be. And I told him, and I said, don't let this happen again. If you let this happen again, it's going to create a big erosion of trust. And my son said, "You're right, Dad. I'm so sorry," and this and that. And so for me, it's super important. I don't even care if like they do other stuff that maybe other parents would be a little anti. To me, that's one hill that I super will die on. I said, you got to let me know where you're at. My oldest son, Rodrigo, he's 23 now, or about to be 23 at the end of the month. He has his own level of autonomy, right? But I still tell him, hey, when you're out and about, when you're doing something, let me know, just let me know. If you're planning something big, if you need some help, go ahead and let me know, blah, 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 blah. And so I think we need to make sure that we give the appropriate level of urgency and importance to things that we're willing to put a stake in. And then other things, I'm not saying that we necessarily need to compromise or kind of let things go or whatnot. But I think the easy thing is like let your child have a voice in it. Let them make a choice upon it so that y'all both have a stake in it. And when it comes down to there's a mess up, it's simple parenting. You hold them accountable. It's not even on you anymore. It's
Mhm.
super simple. It's like, hey, you told me you were gonna get this done at XYZ and it's not done. Now they're the ones that have to face the responsibility of their own accountability. And that's also part of modeling behavior and letting them know, like, hey, you're responsible for this, you're accountable for it as well if you don't do what you told me you were gonna do.
I want to break that down for the audience really quick because you said some really great gold nuggets that I want to make sure that they catch. The first thing you said was make sure that we differentiate as a parent what's really important to us, the hill we're going to die on, the hill we're going to put the stake and the flag in, and which things we know that we could be a little bit more lenient. That was step one. Then you went into um if once we know these two things, these are things, the hills, that stuff that's non-negotiable, we're going to stick to our guns and we're never going to uh get lenient on that. Basically, we're holding our ground on those. All this other stuff over here though, it's really important to give our kids some agency in whatever it is that we're asking them to do, even if it's as simple as eating peas or cleaning their room. Because once we give them agency, we give them some choice in the matter, whether it's how long do you need in order to get this room clean? And now they have a timetable and they're throwing in there, I can get it done by 5 o'clock. Okay. Now they have some choice in it. Or peas, if you don't want to eat peas, what kind of vegetable do you want to eat? At least then, when we have these and we're being more lenient, when they have agency, it just shifts the dynamic a little bit. So now it's a learning experience where now if they fumble, they have to accept the consequences of their action because they had a stake in it to begin with. Is that right? Am I
Yeah,
making
no,
sense?
that's right.
And
No,
then
that's 100%.
lastly, there's one more thing that you said that I thought was amazing, and that I love with the example with your son that he messed up on something that you were, the stake in the ground type of um, of subject. But instead of completely losing trust with him, even though he did something to break that trust with you, you really warned him first. And I love that because you said, look, if this happens again, then I'm going to lose trust with you. Right now, I'm just going to take it as you didn't know any better. That frontal lobe really wasn't working on all cylinders quite yet. So I'm warning you, son, this is what's going to happen if you do that again.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's really, truly a warning. You made it known. You showed him where the error of his ways were, but you weren't screaming at him. You're not yelling at him. It was a discussion. And you're like, hey, I don't know if you realize this kind of thing, but this is what you're doing. And if you do it again, I'm not going to be so forgiving next time. And I just like that approach, which I think just should be commended and role modeled by many more parents because we get so emotional about our kid breaking one of our stake in the ground boundaries that a lot of times our emotions just get, they overtake us. Now we're yelling at our kid and now we're telling them, I can't trust you anymore. You left and you never told me and I'm never going to let you go anywhere anymore. When really, I don't think your son was trying to be like that. He wasn't saying, I'm going to break this rule on purpose. He just was probably, they don't think. So, like again, little girls back to their brain. Kids sometimes they just don't freaking get it. They just don't think about it. They can't see past the end of their nose on some days, even the smartest of kids. And we have to kind of step back as a parent. Remember that. So I just love that about that whole scenario.
Well, I appreciate that, Christina. I think whenever we're parenting, we definitely do have to weigh the pros and cons. One thing that I wanted to make sure that my son understood was that I was disappointed. I wasn't trying to ruin his week, his day. I think. I'm sorry. He was here. It was a big thing for him. I didn't want to ruin it either, so I just waited to the appropriate time that he was by himself. I think, and I need to point that out because I think a lot of parents make that mistake and prioritize that anger, prioritize that uh, transgression above whatever else is going on. And I gotta say, my dad was actually one that taught me that. It
Really?
was as crazy as like I've shared stories about my dad and done this and done that. My dad actually was really good about that. Now he got mad though. He got mad, but he was very discerning when it came time to meeting out that discipline or that anger or whatnot, which was kind of weird to me because there was other times when he didn't when we were by ourselves, right?
Mm.
And so I remember clearly one time I got selected to be part of a high school program called the Presidential Classroom, where they basically select kids from high school that are have good grades and all that stuff, and they send them to Washington D.C. for a week to
Mhm.
kind of get to know the legislative process, meet their senators and their representatives, and et cetera. And a week before that, I had rear-ended somebody. Now it wasn't a bad accident. It was just I popped their bumper, and then their trunk latch hitch messed up. So they had to get it repaired. And of course, I was scared, and I said, "Oh no, I'll take care of it. Let me just let me get your information. This and that." And the gentleman was really kind. He wasn't, he could tell that I was a kid, this, and it goes, should we call your parents? I said, no, I would really appreciate it if I could just handle this myself. And I said, okay, And so I gave him my information, and then I had the trip the next week. So I kind of blew it off. I was hoping to be able to take care of it the next week. The gentleman, he called my dad, he looked up my name, he looked up, and he was able to find that it was my dad. He was my dad, Rodrigo Bravo Jr. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, let me find Rodrigo Bravo. It doesn't take Inspector Gadget to figure that one out, right? And my dad has a construction company, so I mean, it's out there, right? And so my dad calls me. It was Wednesday. It was the middle of the week. I'm having a great time, and my dad goes, "Okay, well that's good, Mijo. I'm glad you're having a great time. Okay, I will talk. I'll talk to you later." And there was this tone to it. And I said, oh man, something's up. Something. And then I immediately was like, oh no, 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 it's the accident. But my dad didn't say anything. And I still had that little anxiety, but at least he didn't get mad at me. At least did this and that. And so I just, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna enjoy the week. Sure enough, I get to the airport, he picks me up. First thing he tells me, "¿Qué chingados pasó?" So it was like, yeah. And of course, I broke my dad's trust,
Mhm.
yeah, that didn't bode well for me afterwards. But the whole point is finding the time and place. And I think it is important that if our kids are having a little bit of joy, you know, the right type of joy, right? I'm not saying like your kid's high and you're gonna wait till like they enjoy their high and then you're gonna get mad at them. No, I get it. That's moment. Let's move, right? But you know, if they make a mistake or something and there's a certain moment there, especially in front of other people, I would say let it ride, you know, if you can, and then, you know, get with them on a personal level, on a private level. And I think that's also part of showing them again what the video is telling us, right? About modeling that behavior and showing them the ability to make right choices, that they don't have to blow up in public, that they don't have to make a scene to get their point across, that we're in control of our emotions and that we understand like, hey, I'm angry, but I don't have to express this anger right now. I'll express it at a more appropriate time. I think those are great qualities to show your kids and to tell them like, hey, this is an important part of growing up is managing your emotions and knowing when to display, when to do this, when to do that. And again, it goes back to modeling that behavior.
But Rodrigo, we are now raised in a culture where we feel like we have to say yes to everything. Okay.
Mm,
And we teach kids that everyone needs to be included, everyone needs to participate, everyone even needs to get a ribbon. So, do you feel like it's okay for kids to say to another kid, I don't want to be your friend, and make those kind of boundaries that this video is talking about? So beyond even learn role modeling those right choices, teaching our kids how to make boundaries so they don't end up in the car with the 16-year-old girl. My take on this would actually be like, yes, I think it's okay for there's certain times when my child it'd be appropriate for say, I don't want to be your friend right now. If obviously that other person's maybe a bad influence or holding them back in some way. But I don't feel like it's acceptable anymore for my child to be able to say those things. I want them to be able to say it, but I don't know if it's acceptable.
hmm,
And they just don't kids are not allowed to say no anymore. And that whole concept really worries me.
hmm.
I
I,
worry
I
about
I gotta
that.
be honest. I gotta be honest with you. My kid says no all the time. I
Do they?
Oh yeah, yeah. My kid, my especially my youngest. Well, my oldest too, but my youngest, he has quite a level of autonomy that he knows. Hey, no, you know, no means no, and he's. We've talked about this before. He's very respectful. He respects, you know, women. Uh, he doesn't go around trying to be this guy, you know, forcing things and trying to be everybody's friend. Nor does he want all his friends, you know. Nor does he make friends with everybody. I think what you're hinting at, and I think it is troublesome, is that we're moving towards an area where we have to accept everything. I'm very inclusive on everything that we do. I'm a super advocate of various causes, of various alliances, but that doesn't mean that I understand everything. It doesn't also mean that I necessarily need to understand everything. There's a kind of a maybe a dissonance that occurs within people that when you accept something is that it means that you also are quote unquote okay with it and that you understand it and that you advocate it. I think there's a difference there, you know, and if we allow people to be who they are, there's nothing wrong with that, you know, and for folks to necessarily say like, oh, I got to agree with this and agree with that. I don't really think that's, you know, really the issue. The issue is that when we accept folks, we should be able to accept folks and just handle that and say like, hey, they're able to live their lives. Hey, if that person wants to do XYZ, okay, let them do that. You know, do I need to be their friend? I'm not really, you know, but hey, if they want to do that, that's fine. You're talking more about like the example that they had where people are doing maybe, you know, nefarious things, illegal things, criminal things. And I absolutely agree with you. I don't think our kids should have to be inclusive to the point that people are just going to be, you know, kind of running them over or doing things that they don't necessarily agree with. I think it's important that we do give them that autonomy because it's an important life skill for them to be able to discern when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. I don't, with your kids, Christina, do you often feel as if they're pressured to be friends with people? Is that
I
what you're
do.
noticing?
I do. And they go to smaller schools, I will say that. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's more prominent in the smaller schools because there's just more eyes. I don't know. I don't there's
Mm.
more they don't want any kid to be left out. So they want everybody to get along and all the things. And but what I'm thinking is why maybe my kids have trouble saying no and your kids find it so much easier. It might come from our households too. Like I think my kids have a hard time saying no to me. And it doesn't sound like your kids have a hard time saying no to you at all, which is awesome. But
No,
my
no, no.
and yeah, and my kids, I don't know,
And it's
there's
always like,
something
"No,
about it.
dad, no, dad,
They
no,
don't wanna
dad,
disappoint
you're
me.
not young anymore. Don't say that. That's not cool,
Yeah.
dad. You can't say mid, dad. You can't say mid." I was like, "Well, mid?
But it's
What's
so
wrong with me saying
important.
mid?" Anyways,
When we tell our kids that it's okay to say no, we give them permission to create boundaries
yes.
that they feel are best for themselves. And so it's it's so important. Oh my gosh, I mean that's so important. But it starts with us in the home. We can't be the exception to the no rule. If they have to learn how to be comfortable saying no to us so they can feel no saying comfortable saying no to everybody else outside of the house.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
this makes teaching boundaries way more difficult for parents though because now we have kids that are saying no to us and we have to figure out how to navigate that.
Well, and
Um,
especially for like you and me that we grew up in, Latino families. I know that in a lot of families out there, especially in Black and brown communities, that hierarchy is respected, still respected, right? It didn't matter what our elders said. You had to respect it, and you can't say no. You got to do what they say or else. And so for us coming from that background, it's especially difficult because not only do we have to fight that, we have to encourage the opposite and then let our kids kind of, I don't want to say talk to us or talk back to us, but giving them an agency that we didn't experience and giving them an agency that does make us feel uncomfortable. And I think that's a great point that you're bringing up, Christina, that we do have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and make sure that, hey, maybe I didn't grow up this way, but there's a better way. And it doesn't necessarily have to be reflective of the way I was raised. I think those are great examples, Christina, and I'm really glad that you're kind of thinking about that for your kids because if they can say no to you, they can say no to anybody. And
yeah,
that's really the point. If they're able to and remember, you have complete authority over them. And I have complete authority. Well, my kids are older now, right? 2023. But I have authority over them. So if they're comfortable saying no to me, I hope that they're able to say no to somebody that has less authority, but is maybe putting them in a compromising or just straight up bad position.
I don't want my kids to be yes to everything. They have to learn how to make these kind of boundaries. And teaching kids how to make boundaries, other than teaching them how to say no to you in a respectful way, like no thank you and standing their ground. And there is ways that you can teach your kids how to say no. I think there's other mistakes that parents make that I want to talk about so that people can listen to this episode and go, okay, oh, maybe I do that. And they can tweak something a little bit, just better parenting. So one of the mistakes I think a lot of parents make in teaching kids how to make these kind of boundaries is being too controlling. They're over dictating what boundaries children should set and can prevent kids from learning how to identify and establish their own boundaries because we're just saying, nope, you need to say no to that. And we're like telling them what they need to say no to and can say yes to. Um, and this will just lead to rebellion a lot because we're just being way too controlling as parents. Um, Another common mistake I think parents make in this is neglecting emotional boundaries. Like parents focus too much on physical boundaries, like personal space, and then never teach anything about emotional boundaries that help kids manage their feelings and their relationships and their mental well-being. I don't I mean, I don't know, Rodrigo, have you even thought about that when you were raising your boys about how do you teach them to uphold emotional boundaries? That's tough.
That's a great question, Christina. It was really difficult when I was young, as a young parent, because I mean, we all learn how to parent on the fly, right? We could buy books and this and that, but I particularly wasn't in a good state to be a young parent. Honestly, I was still very immature, running around, different relationships, etc. So forth. Growing older though, and understanding my personal growth, I think the most important thing that I could show my kids was really how I handled my emotions. As I mentioned earlier, knowing when to be angry, when to do this, when to express yourself, etc. Knowing and understanding what those boundaries are and showing my kids how I handle those was really the best way to show them how to handle those emotions. And that's just in general. I remember, especially a good contrast would be when I was young, a young dad, and I would see my boys, I would miss them, and I would cry and I would miss them and this and that. And it would kind of tell them like, okay, is that okay? Is everything all right? And does dad do anything else? And it creates this kind of unsettling feeling for them that dad can't control their emotions. So what happens to them? They start getting anxiety. They don't know how to handle emotions. Maybe they overreact. And so I started kind of coming to terms with that and saying, like, yeah, I can't be that way. So now, especially when I went through my mental health journey, it's a game changer, and they see how I react to situations. I'm calm. I'm reflective. I think logically. I try not to get emotionally hijacked. My boys are young. I see them go through the same things that I did when I was younger. And I tell them like, "Hey, you gotta relax," and road rage. My oldest, he's a little road rager. Sometimes go, "Oh my god, this person!" And when they see me drive, they see me. I drive like a grandpa. I'm chill. If I got to drive fast, I will drive fast, but I don't get mad. I control my situation. I think really that's the best thing that we can do to show our kids emotional control, emotional stability is by being that ourselves. Now, of course, that's difficult if we haven't handled our own emotions ourselves. I'm a big advocate of mental health, mental wellness. Mental health is mental wealth. I mean, you got to make sure that you handle that because if you can't help yourself, it's going to be super hard to help others. So I'm always encouraging folks that if they feel like they need, some type of counseling or therapy or like something's weighing on them or whatnot, there's a lot of licensed professional counselors out there. They have great toolkits and they can talk you through things and help you control your emotions, help you with whatever you're going through, so that then you can be a great parent and show your kids how you handle that. And in fact, I'll end right here. Me going through counseling really showed my kids like, dang, dad's going through counseling. It started off as couples therapy, ended up as individual therapy, and I talked very openly about that. And so then now my kids, my oldest son, he's going through his therapy, and he's 23. If I had gone through therapy myself when I was 23, as opposed to what I think I started in when I was 34, no 33 or something like that. I can't remember. If I had that big, oh my god, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe president of the United States. I mean,
I was gonna say,
you know,
think of all the things it could have been. Yeah, right.
if only I had got into mental health earlier. But no, but seriously, my son's doing that now. And if he can resolve stuff that he's going through now, he has such a large runway to be a better person. And same thing with my youngest son. He's been to therapy already too. He understands how helpful it is, how necessary it can be, because a lot of times we don't have the tools to really help ourselves. So I think if you really want to show about emotional stability, make sure you're in control of your own emotions. And if you don't have control of your emotions, figure out why and maybe, go down that route and help yourself first.
I love that. I love that you're doing it not just for yourself, you're doing it to be a better parent, which is doing it for your kids, which is great. Um, Another very, very common, I would say, what mistake that parents make when trying to establish boundaries with their kids is ignoring consent in decision making. And this comes from making decisions for children without involving them at all. And so
Mm,
many times parents do this. We just make choices for our kids. But really, getting their consent can teach kids that their boundaries matter, right? Like, how is this going to be great for you? You know, people should ask you how you feel about it before you get involved. And I think that's a super easy one that so many parents can change, and yet we do it all the time. We just make choices for our kids. You're going to go to this school. You're going to do this at this time. Even clean your room right now. You're making choices for your kids and not allowing them to have that agency. So I think that's a small little tweak a lot of parents can do. Another one would be punishing boundary setting. And so our kids finally set the boundary and then we punish them for it unintentionally. We discourage their boundaries because maybe it's inconvenient for us, or our children are asserting themselves and now we feel like they're being rebellious. And so I feel like that's one that we need to watch real carefully as parents about that punishing, that boundary setting. And I'm trying to think. I think there's one more I could think of, and it's failing to adjust as our child grows.
mm,
I think that parents need to adapt their approach to boundary making and teaching our kids how they make boundaries as their child gets older. And this is just everything in parenting. We can't parent a toddler the same way we parent a middle schooler and the same way we parent a high schooler. They grow. Like it just changes. We evolve. And a lot of mistakes that parents make is we tried not to evolve. We're like, this worked 5 years ago. Why isn't it working now? Um, but your kid's a different person now, literally a different person than they were 5 years ago. You're not that different because we're an adult, but they are hugely different. So parents may not adapt their approach to boundaries as their child matures, and it's then your kid gets into a position where their environment's too restrictive, or
mhm.
they're in different stages of a development. They need to kind of tweak things along a little bit. I don't know, I'll give you an opportunity to react on any of those.
No, no, all those are strong points that I think need to be really kind of examined and talked about. The
Oh,
last point that you made right now.
I just thought of another one. Sorry. Before I
No, no,
forgot.
no, go for it, go for it. It sounds like it's a good one. Go for it.
Whoa, yes, this one kills me. Parents forget how to teach kids how to say no, like how to hold boundaries. We like literally physically. And what I mean by this, because I do a whole segment, a whole video on when your kids are in high school and they're getting ready to go to be more independent, whether it's go to parties on their own or fly the nest and go to college. Um, they need to learn about sex, drugs, and peer pressure. And so in that
Mm,
video, I'm always talking to parents about teaching your kids how to say no, because it's not just in words, it's physical. To teach a child to stand up straight, to act confident, the word no is so much more than the word no. And we never really show that. I mean, you can role model it to your child, but there's nothing like having them role model it for you. Like role
mm,
modeling those scenarios when you're going out to a party and you're in a situation where somebody's asking you to drink. And before your kid even steps the foot out the door, to say, what are you going to do in this situation? Not just, don't just tell me what you're going to do. Let's role play it. Oh my gosh. That just gives your child so much more opportunity to have success later because they've thought about it. They know exactly what they're going to say. Instead of trying to make things up on the fly, which rarely goes well. It just is not very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. No, no, that's another great point as well, kind of coaching your kid through those kind of situations. Your kids are not going to be probably all for it. Again, you got to get to that point. You got to get to that point where you can have those communication, that type of communication. If you have not communicated with your kid, if you don't have that relationship with your kid, and then out of nowhere, hey, I want to talk to you. Hey, so let's talk about sex. That's not going to go over well because you haven't established that trust, that communication. If you build it little by little by little, I promise you, your kid will probably go to you and ask you about it. I know my kids have. I know of the parents that I've talked to that have worked with their kids and have built those relationships. Their kids are very open with them because they trust their parent. They're not going to come through with judgment just because they ask something. I wanted to go back on one other point that you had about evolving. I think that's such a great point and so important. Christina, I'm not trying to call you out. What kind of phone do you have? Oh, wait, you have an Android, right?
I do.
You do have an Android. Okay, okay. But how old is your phone?
Oh, it's actually pretty new. Yeah, I would
Pretty
say
new. Okay,
a
okay, okay.
year, maybe a
So
year.
it's
Yeah.
okay. There you go. And so my point is, we don't have our phones from those times when our kids were teenagers. The iPhone 5 was released in 2012. Okay, that would make it a kid that's graduating this year. If I'm doing the math correctly, a kid that's graduating this year or maybe last year, they were in kinder when that phone came out. So as parents, do you have an iPhone 5? Are you still with the same phone, just walking around and saying like, "No, this is the same phone"? Of course not. No one is, okay? I held out, okay? I'm still holding out. Okay? I have an iPhone X. I know everybody's gonna be like, "Yee," but I have an iPhone X. I'm comfortable with it. It's all good. I really do need a better camera, but that's besides the point. But even then, I still adapted. I still evolved to another phone. And most folks, they kind of evolve every other phone, or maybe some folks, every phone. Our parenting needs to be the same. You cannot parent a child like the way you did in kinder, the way you're going to do in high school. It just does not work. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, Christina, because a lot of parents that I talk to, that I am friends with, anecdotal evidence and so forth, a lot of people try to do that. Oh, well, they're that's my kid, and that worked, but I'm like, they're 5 at that time, they're 6. You're supposed to be their authority figure. They're not trusting anybody else. But by the time they're in high school, that authority figure is starting to lessen, and now they're starting to get influenced by other figures. That's where you need to really work on that. And I'm not saying like you got to be a friend. You want to be your kid's friend, but that's not the goal. The goal though is to establish communication and making sure that they understand and that they trust you. That if something bad happens or they have a question, that you're the one they ask for advice, that you're the one they come and talk to, not their little friend, that they share, fifth period with, and they ask them a question, and he's like, "Oh, this is what you gotta do," and blah blah blah. Nah, man, that's not. You don't want your kid doing that. You don't want your kid asking some other parent or some other adult that doesn't know your kid. It doesn't have that experience. So build that relationship, create that communication with them so that they trust you and that you can show them what borders are and what boundaries are. Last point that I'll make very briefly, you said this earlier as well, Christina. I think it's really critical that we do give our kids that agency, let them make those choices. And honestly, on little things, I would even say let them bump their head a couple times. Let them understand the gravity of and the consequences of their choices. Obviously, you're not gonna let them just go drink and drive. That's stupid. No, I'm not saying anything like that, right? But maybe they have an important thing to do, or not so important thing, but they want to go to a movie, right? And you don't stress them about it. And they're like, "Hey, it's 5 o'clock. We got to go." You don't say anything, and now they're late to the movie and this and that. Now they understand, like, "Hey, I was going by your clock. You're the one that wanted to, wait to the very last minute, and now you missed part of the movie." That's not a big consequence, but it's a consequence nonetheless. And they understand that if they had agency in that choice, that they're responsible for that choice and they're responsible for that shortcoming. That's a bigger lesson, and that's a greater lesson for themselves. and improving their decision-making capabilities if we show them like, hey, there's consequences to the decisions that you make.
I want to end by asking you, what do you think is either the most difficult thing about teaching your child how to have boundaries, or what was the more difficult thing for you as you're now toward the end of this journey of parenting? You got your kids are older, they're old enough to be out of your house, even though they're not quite yet. You know, through your journey, what was something that you remember that was hard for you?
I think when you mentioned and we were talking about the emotional control, I think that's definitely the hardest. We don't really understand the pain that we're going through until we fix it. We're so subconsciously doing things that we don't even understand ourselves until we go through our mental health journey. Um, I know that for myself, growing up as a young parent, I hadn't resolved some of those things. So what did I end up doing? I ended up doing a lot of things that I didn't want to do subconsciously because I hadn't fixed that. Or conversely, I overcompensated. So, for example, like my dad was, the tough guy, right? And never showed emotion and this and that. Maybe I showed too much emotion, where it's like I didn't have control of my emotions. I think that's probably the one life lesson that I always tell folks is, the best thing you can do is really find out what's wrong with you. It sounds crazy, but if we don't do that, then we're going to keep repeating these same mistakes and we're going to keep doing things and unfortunately you may even end up hurting other people during that process. So I think emotional control is probably the biggest thing that I would take away from that, because our kids they're going to learn to love the way from you, not only from the way you love them, but also the way you love others. And if they see that and that's the way they see love, that's the way they're going to interpret love. And then they may get stuck in the same, you know, issues that maybe you have if you haven't resolved that. And that all goes back to, therapy and stuff. We were talking about this in the last episode too. Remember, Christina, where we were talking about emotional control and love and how our childhood really affects how when we grow up. That is so key. And I think it's so important that we do that as parents, because it really does translate 100% to boundaries. And if our kids see that we can't control our own boundaries, well, guess what? Our kids are not going to control their own boundaries either. And I'm positive that every parent out there loves their kid and wants their kid to A, respect boundaries, but also B, uphold their own boundaries so that they're not in a position where they have to compromise themselves.
Thank you for being here today. If you would like to reach out to Rodrigo Bravo for his co-parenting mediation and coaching services, you can email him at rodrigobravo@gmail.com. Start your Impactful Parent journey by downloading the Impactful Parent app. The Impactful Parent app is free so that you can carry help, tips, and parenting resources right in your pocket. Download your app today. You got nothing to lose, it's free. So search for Impactful Parent on your phone's app store and discover how you can step up your parenting game and become a more impactful parent. Also, remember that this episode is just a small part of what the Impactful Parent offers. Also available are online courses, parent support groups, coaching services, and of course, the app. So find out more by going to theimpactfulparent.com. But until next time, you got this. I'm just here to help.